This week on Influence, there's tens of thousands of people playing trivia on the internet, and you can't join. Greetings, Internet travelers, one and all. Welcome back to Influence with me, Matt Silverman, a guy who's been covering internet culture and technology and social media for, 4,000 to 8,000 years at this point. It's been since the Pleistocene era began. And if you've been with me for any length of time across the various projects and shows that I touch and am involved in, produce, maybe you see or hear me, maybe you don't. A common theme might emerge, and that is trivia, facts, information that is both entertaining and perhaps insightful, interesting. We do trivia on this show every single week. That is federally mandated, of course. We lost a really important case back in the 80s, and now we have to quiz every single guest. And in the previous incarnation of the show, we would always do trivia with the hosts. I hosted a weekly comedy trivia show on a website called www.youtube.com. And it was a lot of fun. So I am thrilled. I am overjoyed to welcome this week's guest, who has been running a trivia league on the information superhighway for a very long time, and I am incensed to know that this is the first I've heard of it. A friend of mine, we were at a show together. We were seeing some theater. That's theater RE, the fancy way, the good way. And he is like, "Oh, hang on. It was intermission." He's like, "Hang on. I got to do my trivia thing." I'm like, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "Yeah, this is this thing called LearnedLeague." And he's like showing me the questions, and it's like these like really detailed questions, and he's answering, and he's competing with someone else. And I'm like, "You could just Google those answers." And he's like, "No, that would be cheating." And I was like, "Just what? How can they tell you not to cheat?" And he's like, No. This is LearnedLeague. And there's a whole code of ethics and honor." And I said, "What is this? You need to invite me to this." And he said, I don't know. I don't know how to do that. And I said, "I need to find out about this." And so I messaged the proprietor of this long-lived trivia league, and fortunately, he wrote back to me and said his name is Thorsten A. Integrity. He is the creator and proprietor of LearnedLeague, but we're going to have some real talk. That's not his real name. We're going to talk about how he created this, where he comes from, what is he doing, and I am just thrilled to meet and ask and try to stump today's guest. It is Shayne Bushfield, the creator of LearnedLeague. Welcome to Influence.
Thank you for having me. Pleasure to be here, man.
Who are you? What are you? Where are you, if you're willing to say?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question. Who am I? How long do we have to chat here? So my name is Shayne Bushfield. I run a trivia league, an online trivia league called LearnedLeague, like you said, under the guise of my superheroic alter ego, Thorsten A. Integrity, which is a name that I created 25 plus years ago and have regretted it for about 25 plus years. But that's my story. I'm currently in Seattle, where I live and where I run the league. I'm sitting here in my office, which is sort of LLHQ, I call it. It's kind of the brain center of everything LearnedLeague. And so, yeah, that's who and where I am.
For our audio-only listeners, Shayne has like a very impressive bookshelf behind him, which must prove that he reads a lot of books and definitely finished all of those books and uses them for trivia, I assume.
I could show you some of those books. Not a single one of them would be interesting to actually read, but if you open it up randomly, you might find an interesting fact here and there, and that's why I have them.
So take us back in time. You have, an FAQ on the website. You have basic information about the origins of LearnedLeague. But for people who are truly not familiar, and I've never heard of it until like 2 weeks ago or whenever it was, what is the origin story of this trivia league?
Yeah, so the origin story goes back to around 1997, and I will say the origin story isn't really. It's very different today. So this is just sort of quote unquote trivia about LearnedLeague. But anyway, so I was working and living in New York City. I was working at a law firm. Yeah, East Coast City. Working at a law firm in Rockefeller Center. And I was working, so there's a lot of detail here. I won't dive too deeply into it, but I was sort of running this group of temps who were working in a satellite office of this law firm. Okay, so the law firm itself was in 30 Rockefeller Plaza, and we were across the street, Radio City Music Hall, and we were doing mind-numbing work, just absolute mind-numbing law firm type of data entry, things like that. And we were representing a really nasty client too. So, so that was part of kind of the drudgery and the, depressing nature of the job.
No one was having fun at this time, it sounds like.
Right. Yeah. And it's also worth noting that no one was there as a career. So I was recently graduated from college. So I was fairly new to New York. I was planning on going to graduate school. Everyone else there had something else going on, either similar to me, or we had professional actors, musicians, artists, all sorts of things. It's New York City, all types of people, just doing this job for money in the day. And so we were in the satellite office, very little supervision, difficult to get through the day. So I created some games to play. Started out with different types of games. Just like dictionary type of games, things like that, kind of like put it up on the whiteboard, and it eventually turned into trivia because I was always really into trivia as a kid and growing up. And so it became kind of trivia question of the day, or like a trivia contest, answer these 10 questions, stuff like that. And then that evolved into a league where I structured, divisions. There were about 25 people in this office. So, I had, divisions and head-to-head matches against everyone would play one another and get the same questions. And so it was fun. You could talk about it. And this was all offline. This was because we were all physically in the same place.
This was my burning question was like, this is IRL. And for the Gen Z and Alpha listeners, you can't just pull up an app to have fun at work and have trivia. Like Shayne has to make this happen, right?
Yeah, right. And in fact, I remember the time where the group that I was in, I remember when we got the internet on our computers. and it wasn't like a given that you had it, right? You had to kind of have it installed, so to speak. So anyway, so we're playing this, live head to head. Lots of fun. I'd print out the sheets, and then you'd write your answers and put it in a box, and then I'd do the manual scoring, and then I had standings on the wall.
And sorry, is this in the office, or is this going out to the bar after work?
Yeah, this is in the office. This is during the day. This is during work hours. Yeah.
Great. I love that this corporate law firm was paying you to run a trivia tournament during work hours. Continue.
They were definitely doing exactly that. Yeah. It was pretty nice, actually.
Yeah.
And so that lasted for a while. Lots of fun. But like I said, everyone was sort of there on a temporary basis for one reason or another, and that included me. So I went off to do other things. And so the LearnedLeague kind of was over, right? It was never like a thing that was like, this is going to last for decades and be a thing. This was a little game that we created. And the second time around we did it, we named it LearnedLeague. And actually a little tidbit for you here, LearnedLeague is actually named after a person with the last name of Learned. So it's not actually, if his last name were Smith, it wouldn't be Smith League. So it does work for the theme. But yeah, that's kind of a part of it as well.
Who is it? Is
From the
this a
early days.
notable? Is this a famous person or someone in the office?
This is a very close friend of mine
Okay.
who worked in the office at the time as
Hmm.
well. Um, and so yeah, we were coming up with like, I don't think we had a name for it originally, or we called it like Boulder League because we were doing Boulder Dash before that. So we said we need to give this a real name, and so someone suggested, oh, let's name it after Eric, and because his last name is Learned, and it's blah blah blah. Right, you get
Eric
it. So
Learned. Great
yeah,
name. Okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And so anyway, so we do that for a little while, and then we all kind of go our separate ways.
Yeah.
I go off to a different job, and then I go off to business school. Every other person goes off to do something else. And so I'm in business. I'm just going to go on with this story until you stop me.
No,
There's a
no.
lot.
I'm
Okay.
very curious about all this. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're in the year 2000, and I'm in between my 2 years of business school, and I'm still in New York. And so I have this internship, and my internship, basically the project for my internship was to manage a vendor who's creating a web portal for this group.
Okay.
Web
Love it.
portals were a really big deal in
Yep.
companies back then.
This is internal intranet
Yeah,
situation.
Intranet portal for
Yeah.
this organization that I worked in at this company. Yeah. And so I thought to myself, okay, in order to manage this vendor, I kind of need to know some web programming of my own.
Okay.
So I said, okay, I'm going to try to teach myself HTML, just some basic stuff. And I thought, well, one way to do that would be to create a website. And what kind of website would I create? I'll create a LearnedLeague website.
Cool.
And so the summer of 2000 is when the LearnedLeague, LearnedLeague.com was created. And I think you can even like go into like Whois and look it up and see when I'm pretty sure you will find summer of 2000. That's when the domain was created.
Amazing.
And so the LearnedLeague website was born then. Super, super primitive. I'm so bummed that I don't have any kind of record of it. That's kind of the nature of the internet.
Yeah.
But I would love to see it, but also probably be very embarrassing.
Yeah.
But when
I don't know when the Internet Archive started scraping websites, so I don't know if there's anything archived somewhere.
Yeah, I think the early versions of the website are lost, unfortunately.
Yep.
Well, they're probably on some. At least like the files are probably in some directory at Pfizer where I had my internship. Because I did it while I was at the job, just like before. But so anyway, so I emailed all the old people I worked with at the firm, and I said, hey, I'm resurrecting. Remember LearnedLeague? Like, oh yeah, I remember that game we played in the office. Yeah, you want to do it? Like, we could do it by email now. Even though it was a website, it wasn't like a forum or anything. It was just like a static website. So that's when it started, or restarted, I should say. And so that was LearnedLeague 4, I think, around there. Season 4, and then so it restarted then, and then we kept it going. And then my second year of business school, I was able to do it on the side, and then I graduated, went back to that company, was able to do it on the side, and then kind of kept going. And so it's been going on uninterrupted since then.
Since 2000.
Yeah. So the website was created, and it's been pretty much 4 seasons a year since then. Okay.
And so it's this initial group of 20-ish, 25 people that you know personally.
Yeah.
What was the impetus for expanding beyond that? Was it inviting friends to join, or did it become publicly known somehow?
Yeah,
online?
it wasn't publicly known. It was just, so at that point we were all remote. We weren't connected physically, and so if you had a buddy who wanted to play, just send me their email and I'll include them.
Yep.
And so that's how it grew. And in a sense, that's still how it works. It's just a little bit more formal. But if you have a buddy who wants to play, you basically refer them, you send their information, and then they get an invitation and then they join.
And I just want to put a pin on that, or a bow on it, which is like, you can barely play video games online at this time. Like a multiplayer. I mean, there were, but like the idea of a multiplayer community game that is so simple to just download to your phone today was not really a thing in 99 2000, right?
Right. It was, you know what it really was more like, at least in terms of sort of structurally, it was more like how fantasy football and fantasy baseball things
Oh,
worked,
okay. That's a great
where it's
analogy.
just like you would go, like if you played fantasy baseball in 2000, you play online, you could
Hmm.
choose your stuff, but it was largely like your standings. You just go to see how
Right.
things are going.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's kind of how the Learned League website was. It just, you didn't actually technically play on the website at the very
Right.
beginning. You just would
Okay.
go there to see standings and your
And the
opponents and things like
standings
that.
were powered by you, meaning that you would take the data, the right and wrong answers, tally them up, and put them into the form, or was it ingesting data somehow?
Yeah, no, it was about as primitive as you can imagine it to be. So I
Manual
would
work.
receive, yeah, at the very beginning, I would just receive email with your answers. I would have, basically, for all intents and purposes, an Excel spreadsheet
Yeah.
that I would just enter your information, whether you got it right or wrong, and that would do the math for the defense and things like that.
Yep.
And then that would basically also, I built it so it would basically create HTML code,
Okay.
which I would then basically upload
Yeah.
essentially, right, or replace the correct code.
Great.
And that's how it worked. Yeah.
Yep. So friends of friends start to say, "Oh, this is really fun. You should get in here." So like, what's the
Yeah.
growth trajectory? 2000, it's 25 people, and then how big are we getting over the next couple of years?
Yeah. So the growth back then was very slow
Mm-hmm.
because there wasn't really any ambition to grow. It
Right.
was just kind of a fun, it was purely a hobby, right? And
Yep.
so it was just like something that I enjoyed. I enjoyed writing trivia questions. I enjoyed like having fun with friends and kind of staying connected in that way,
Yeah.
having an excuse to kind of, be involved with other people. And so the growth, so I never ever promoted it. In fact,
Right.
to this day, I don't promote LearnedLeague. But even back then,
I was
I
wondering about that. Yes.
but especially back then, it was just like, friends and like friends of friends, and so with the network effect, it would start to grow a little bit, but it was very slow. And I can tell you some numbers. So
Mm-hmm.
if LearnedLeague 4 was somewhere in the 20s, when I moved to Seattle in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So this is 8 years after that, right?
Yeah.
So 30 plus. I think it was in the late 30s in terms of seasons,
Mm-hmm.
like 37 or something like that. It was still fewer than 200 players.
Yeah. Okay.
So very slow. Like that
Mm-hmm.
growth in those early days was very slow.
Okay. That's
Yeah.
2008. So fast forwarding a bit, obviously, we're going to backtrack again, but like, if you're able to share, what's the number? Where are we today in 2024? Total
So
players.
in terms of player, so there's two numbers that are slightly different: players and members.
Yeah.
But in terms of players, this past season that just ended the beginning of this week was just over 32,000 players.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the
And
growth has changed.
it has changed, and I'm very curious about the dynamics of that. Well, we'll get into that. So let's go back. So it's friends of friends, and it's starting to grow, and it's not like well known, but you have like a core community. And was the rule always invite only? Like random people cannot just find it on the web and then join. They have to be invited, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
What was the origin of that rule? Was that organic, or did you know like we got to keep the riffraff out? It's got to be a closed system.
Yeah. So there are a few reasons for it. One of them is sort of the riffraff part of it. It goes along with some of the ways we try to maintain the honesty of the
Right.
gameplay,
Mm-hmm.
and that is by requiring every player be referred by a current player.
Right.
So you have to, in order to join, you can't just randomly join. You have to be referred by someone who's in the league already,
Mm-hmm.
who has shown themselves as much as possible to be an honest player, and to vouch that you will be an honest player too,
Right.
right?
It took me aback so much because we live in such a world of apps and scale and join and everything's free and download whatever you want. And I was like, this sounds cool. I want it. Just give it to me. And I was like, wait, I can't get in here. Let me in, And I was like,
Yes.
wow, that's so unique in 2024. I can't think of anything like this.
Well, yeah. So that's part of the reason, and it's not necessarily to be exclusive.
No.
And what I mean by that is that you don't have to pass any tests to join.
Right.
You don't have to meet any criteria. You simply have to be referred.
Yes.
And you have to be referred under your real name, and you have to participate under
Right.
your real name,
Right.
Which is another part of it. So that's one part of it. That might be the biggest part, certainly a significant part. The other part is simply that the structure of the league is a big part of the league.
Yeah.
You know what I mean by that? Like the way it's structured is fundamental to how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So if we have X number of players and then the next season we have 2X, if it just doubles in a season, which theoretically could happen if we just opened it up, that would wreak havoc on the structure.
Right.
And that would be detrimental to the league, and it would also be detrimental to the individual experience of participating, which is the most important thing from my perspective. And so controlling that growth has allowed it's grown plenty. So it's not like I've limited it unnecessarily, in my opinion. It's certainly grown, but by managing it in that way, it's been able to grow organically within its structure. And we've modified things here and there over the years, but maintaining that same structure and just keeping it within the scale of that structure, I think has enabled it to last. One of the things, at least. Yeah.
Yep. You have segued beautifully into my next set of questions, which is like, okay, please explain the mechanics of the game and that very structure of the league, because this is also very fascinating to me as a game enthusiast.
Okay, so there are two parts to that. There's the structure of the game, in other words, the structure of the match, and then there's the structure of the league.
Right.
And so first I'll talk about how a match works. And so regular LearnedLeague, kind of the mothership competition, is called LearnedLeague. It's the website, and the group is called LearnedLeague, but also the main competition is called LearnedLeague. It's 4 seasons a year. And so how that works is you as a player, each match day, there are 25 matches in a season. Each day, you play against one individual opponent. So the two of you answer 6 trivia questions. Those 6 questions, by the way, are answered by every player that day.
Okay. They're not unique to the match.
Correct, yeah. So everyone gets the same 6 questions. But just for the purpose of a head-to-head match, you two are answering these 6 questions. So you answer them to the best of your ability, and you get 0 through 6 right. And then what you also do is you assign a point value to each of those 6 questions for your opponent. And so we call that defense, because that is a way to manage how many points your opponent gets. And so the way it works is there are 6 questions. So there are 9 total points possible.
Okay.
1 question you assign 3 points. 2 questions you assign 2, 2 questions you assign 1, and then 1 question you assign 0 points.
Got it. Okay.
And so the way that works, probably naturally, if there's a question that you think your opponent will definitely get right, then you assign 0 points to it, so they don't even get any points for getting it right. And then conversely, if you think, there's no way they'll know that, 3 points, and then.
I love that part of it because it adds so much strategy. And also, to clarify for listeners, these are not multiple choice questions. They are rich, detailed questions, and you must type the correct answer full stop. There's no choosing. There's no odds.
That's right. Yeah, it's free text. You type in your answer.
Free text. Okay, well, I have many more questions, but just to finalize the mechanical nature of the head-to-head match, what do you know about your opponent? Are they randomly assigned, or do you know their score in certain, like maybe this person's good at science, so I'm going to devalue the science questions that they're definitely going to know. Is that a thing? Is that part of it?
That's a big part of it. So every player has a profile page on the site, which has some information about them, all self-provided. So it'll have where they live. It'll have possibly where they went to college, if they went to college and they provide that information. and they can, provide gender, pronouns, things like that. That's pretty much it. That's provided by the player.
Okay.
And then, however, what's really valuable is there's data about every question that they've answered in LearnedLeague thus far.
Yes.
So part of that is bucketed into categories, and so you have all questions are bucketed into one of 18 categories.
Okay.
Then each profile page shows how that player has done in those 18 categories over the course of their entire LearnedLeague career.
Got it.
Which for many players is tens of seasons, thousands of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you really can get a sense for what a person knows trivia-wise on their profile page. And then you also, if you want to drill even more deeply, you can go to a page that shows individual questions and which ones they've answered. So if there's a question about,
very good.
If you see a question about, let's say Henry V, and you see, okay, their world history is pretty mediocre, right? Let's say it's 50%. You say, okay, well, I don't know what they know about world history. You can go into their profile, to the page with the questions history, and you can see, oh, well, they know a lot about Plantagenets, and they know a lot about the Tudors, so they probably know about Henry V.
Right.
They happen to know nothing about Asian history or something. That's why I brought it down. And so, so that gives you more granular information about what they know, and then you can use that to play defense.
It's like playing Trivial Pursuit at a table with your friends, but it allows you to know a stranger's strengths and weaknesses without actually knowing them. And it's so simple, but it's actually, I find it quite brilliant. I'm really intrigued by this.
It's kind of I feel like it's sort of the secret sauce that allowed LearnedLeague to become what it is, because in the very beginning, it was just trivia, right? It was just like answer these 6 questions, and then Brian won 3-2 because he got 3 right, and Jeff got 2 right. And that's kind of fun. And when it's friends, that's fun. But when it's thousands of players, you kind of need a little bit more spice to it. And so the defense adds that component because it's not straightforward. Like everything I just described sounds like, oh, you just go to a profile and see what they know. Well, you get some indication, but you don't really know.
Yeah.
And it's not just simply, do they know about Henry V? It could be a really easy question about Henry V. Like, how many Henrys were there before Henry V? There were 4. So, like, you don't need to know much about the player to know that. Or it could be really hard. So you have to, and this is always a topic of conversation that people kind of, wonder about with each other. Like, how important is the skill of your opponent in assigning defense versus the difficulty of the question? You have to weigh those things.
Totally.
And there's a lot of luck that goes into everything in LearnedLeague, but and particularly this. But it's not random. You have to make a choice, and so those choices have an impact on the score. So that's a big part of the game.
I love this. So, who is writing the questions? Are you creating all the trivia yourself? Is there a small team? Is it volunteers?
So for LearnedLeague, the main competition, 25 matches a season, 4 seasons a year, those questions are all written by me.
Yep.
So I don't have any help with writing those questions. I have lots of help with testing and editing and all that stuff. But I do the writing for those. And then there are other contests within LearnedLeague that happen during the off season.
Okay.
We call them mini leagues and 1 days. And so just in short, it's just, 12 or 11 or 12 days of a mini league. And then a 1 day is 1 day of 12 questions. Those are all topic specific. And those are all written by LearnedLeague members. And so they propose, we have a proposal period during the year. If you want to propose to write a 1 day next year at some point, you propose the topic, and then it gets approved or not, and then it gets put on the calendar, and then that player writes those questions.
And then in terms of judging correct answers, because it's free text, are you combing through every single written answer to make sure that things are right and wrong? And are there gray areas sometimes where you're like, well, this person's typing the right thing, but they spelled it weird? Like how do you judge?
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of scoring, there's a process. There's like lots of algorithms and systems that have been built over the 20 years of having done this.
Right.
So a lot of it is largely automated.
Great. Okay.
And so it's a significant effort. There are
Yeah.
32,000 players,
Yeah.
but it's not looking through 32,000 answers.
That's kind of what I was
times
wondering
6
about. Yeah.
for each question. So it's not that bad. But the gray area that you talk about, enthusiastically, yes, there is a huge gray area for every question, no matter how straightforward, no matter how simple, no matter how cut and dried the answer might seem to be. There's always a huge gray area in different ways.
Yeah.
One is that if the question allows itself to have alternate correct answers,
Right.
which can be very difficult to avoid.
Yes.
And in that case, you have to make an assessment of alternate correct answers. Are they correct? Do they pass muster? And then even if those aren't present in a given question, there's just things like spelling errors and typos, which I don't think I would never assert that LearnedLeague players are not good at spelling.
Right.
What I will say instead is that they don't seem to be all that good at typing.
Yeah.
Because there are so many spelling errors every single day that have to be kind of judged. And there's no way to really draw a line. Like we have rules around it. And the main rule that we go by is our sounds like rule, which means so if you type something, if you were to say that out loud, does it sound like the correct answer?
Yeah.
If it does, or does it sound like what the correct answer might sound like?
If if I know the answer conclusively and I speak it aloud on Jeopardy, Ken Jennings will say that is correct.
Right.
It means that I know it. And we'll talk about this too. You're not allowed to Google or spell check or look up anything on the internet while you're answering the questions. So I'm not going to know how to spell this weird, Indian name or whatever it is,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That happens all the time, especially for complicated answers, especially answers that are foreign language words. And so there has to be judgments that are made every single day, hundreds of them, to determine whether that fits the sounds like guideline, whether that's an obvious typo. And the person who makes the typo thinks it's a lot more obvious than the person reading the typo, so that comes up a lot. And so, there are lots of judgments. They're always on the edges, right? I mean, if you talk about 32,000 players, there are only maybe a few dozen that are really impacted at these edges, but that's still a fair number.
It's a lot.
Yep.
I want to talk about the honor system and such, but suddenly I'm wondering. And you don't have to name names, but like, are there notable people in the group? Are there celebrities, or I mentioned Ken Jennings, like he would love this as a person. Are there people like that in the group? And you don't have to shout them out unless maybe they're public about it.
Well, so so there is a privacy policy. So I'm not at liberty to say that. So the answer to your question is yes. There are many very famous people in LearnedLeague.
And are they allowed? Do they have to use their real names when they participate, according to the rules?
They do, according to the rules. I have made a few exceptions, which I can't obviously tell you those exceptions.
Of course.
It would defeat the purpose of the exception. I think you would agree if you knew the exceptions that they'd be justified. But there are a lot that don't use pseudonyms.
Yeah. Okay.
But on the other hand, it's just your last name and first initial. So, so Tom Cruise is not in the league, but even if it's a Cruise T, you wouldn't know that it's him, right? So there are players like that who do use their real names and are very well known, but it's not obvious.
Yeah.
And then there are some very famous people who have been given an exception for that. And then, and you mentioned Ken. Ken actually was a player for a very long time. Cool. Yeah. He stopped. He can't really play when he's
a little busy.
Jeopardy.
He's a little busy now. Yeah.
Yeah. There are lots of notable people in the league.
That's very cool.
And cool. and I have to say there are probably more than I even know because you don't really when you sign up, you just provide your name, right? And there's lots of people that sign up, so I don't like look through every one and see, do I recognize that name? So there have been occasions where I didn't realize someone famous was in the league until I saw a membership dues payment from them, and I saw the name. Wait, is that?
Mm-hmm.
No. And then
Mm-hmm.
oh my gosh, that's so and so, and they've been in the league for 3 years. I wasn't even aware of it.
Shayne, you have so much data, valuable data. If you just put your integrity to the wayside, you could make so much money on all these email addresses. You could start a newsletter. Tom Hanks would be on it. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I've been told that, but yeah,
I know.
Pass on that offer.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Of course.
This is a massive operation. So you mentioned dues, and I was curious about that. Like I presume, but you tell me that this is not your income. Like you are not paying the rent or mortgage with this. It is a side project, but dues are paid to keep servers on and such. How do you? What does that look like right now? Not numbers, but like how do you approach that?
Well, so yeah, there are dues. The dues support the league, and this is my job. This is my full time.
Oh, it is
job.
full time.
Yeah,
Fantastic. I didn't realize
that. Been it for many years. Yeah,
got it.
So my last job was at Microsoft. I worked at Microsoft when I moved to Seattle.
I inferred that from some cryptic stuff on the website, but yes.
So I worked there, and then I left in 2014 to do this full time. There's a whole story around that.
You're a trained attorney, but then you went into business, and then were you doing tech at Microsoft or what?
No, I'm not an attorney. I was working at the law. Yeah, so the law firm I was working just straight out of college. In fact, I started there with the thoughts of maybe becoming an attorney.
Got it.
And so people in that situation, if they're thinking of becoming an attorney, I would recommend that they work in a law firm.
Yeah.
So that they learn that they don't want to be an attorney. That's certainly what happened for me. So I changed direction. So I went to business school after that, and then so I'm not a tech person. So I have an MBA, and then I went and got like a traditional MBA type job after school. And then when I went to Microsoft, it was for a business job. It was not for. I'm not a programmer by training, even by not even a very good one by hobby. So it's all the business side stuff for me. And then in 2014, it got to the point where the LearnedLeague. Well, really, what happened is in 2014, it got to the point where my Microsoft career was growing, and good things were happening there, and LearnedLeague was also growing, and good things were happening there, and they were it was really starting to become too much.
Yeah,
and I had to make
only 40 hours in the week to make it all happen. Yeah,
right. And so that's when I had to make a decision, one or the other, and I chose to jump ship and do LearnedLeague full time, which was 100% the right decision.
Good. That's
absolutely
wonderful to hear. I really must have assumed that it remained a side passion project, and I'm thrilled to hear that you are a full time. I talk to YouTubers and podcasters and TikTokers, and the jump from I worked, at Burger King and now I'm on TikTok. That leap is a big part of what we talk about here, and I'm thrilled to hear that you made the transition, to this creative lifestyle. So you are writing the trivia for the main league. What makes a good trivia question, or and maybe how do you approach it? Are you browsing the web? Are you looking through books? Are you thinking of this idea, and then you go back and research it? How do you write?
Yeah, there are different ways. Traditionally, the way I would write a trivia question is kind of by exploration. And what I mean by that is like I would just kind of be sitting in a chair with a book, like one of these encyclopedias behind me or something like that. And I would just kind of rifle through it until something stopped me. And then at that point, I would maybe come up with a rough question, draft it into on a sheet of paper. I actually have here, I can show you. Sorry to go out of frame here, but I have these sheets of paper that I've kept for the last few years. So if there's ever like a trivia museum, this might be a good thing to have in there. Because these are all like Actually, some of these haven't appeared yet, so I shouldn't read that out loud.
Okay.
But, anyway, so they're written in my hand on these sheets of paper with the LearnedLeague logo on it. And then, so I'll write it, and then I'll just kind of tuck it in the book. And so after I'm done with that book, there might be 3 or 4 or 10 of these sheets of paper in there. And then I'll put it over to the side and then do that with some other stuff. This is all like before the season. And then at some point, I'll take that book and I'll bring it over to a computer. And that's when I will try to, first of all, corroborate whatever information, because there's so much false information in these reference books, you wouldn't believe it.
I'm fascinated by that. We think of the internet as such a, chaotic misinformation place, but prior to it was just 6 white guys writing books, and that's all we had to go on. And
you're exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you bring up another thing about the 6 white guys. If you're going through a world history, I have all kinds of world history books, and it's so easy to open up one of those and write a question about British monarchy, you know, or colonialism in Africa, something like that, or, the American Revolution. It's very difficult to find good stuff about other stuff. Asia or Africa or indigenous community, whatever, women. It's just not in there. So you have to look for that. So that's why I say a part of what I do is kind of exploration, but that's not all of it. Because if I limited it to that, then the field of subjects would be pretty limited, unfortunately.
Right.
And then I'll bring it over to a computer, figure out what I need to add, and then I'll end up crafting the question, and then I'll be roughly done with it, and then I'll send it to some folks to read it just for difficulty, and then other folks read it for more thorough testing, and then I send it to copy editing, and so all kinds of stuff that happens.
Yeah, I love the focus group testing. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
I have trivia for you. We also need to take a break. But first, before we move on from the mechanical questions about LearnedLeague, I do have a voicemail for you from one of your players.
Call to the public. Call.
Hi, Matt, and hello, Thorsten. My name is Pat Higginson P on LearnedLeague, a big fan, and I have a purely practical question around answer checking. I'm sure you have an automated way of checking the answers of all the, thousands of people who are playing LearnedLeague in a given round or at a given match. And it seems like there are lots of variations that can happen within a correct answer. And then there's this quality where it seems like sometimes there are surprise, also acceptable answers. I wonder if you know about those ahead of time and just set it up so whatever the checking mechanism is catches them. Or have you ever, had to accept another answer because so many people were offering it and it seemed like it was suitable as an answer? I'm curious about that. Thank you so much.
I realize we sort of have already covered that serendipitously, but I wonder if there's any other thoughts you have on it.
Yeah, it's all of the above. Sometimes I'll write a question and I'll write it and then I'll say, I know there's an alternate answer to this question, and I'm going to accept it. It could be very technical or very idiosyncratic, something like that. But I don't necessarily want to try to write out of the question because it would just make the question butchered, or unusable. So I'll know ahead of time. This is the answer. I'll also accept this.
Right.
And then there are all those other times where, despite the testing or whatever happens before, there will be an opening for another question. That's actually one of the hardest things to test. Is, in fact, it's the hardest, in my opinion, to test in a question is alternate answers, because you can see a question and you can do hours of research to confirm that the answer is correct.
Mm-hmm.
But what's harder is to find out if there are other correct answers, because you can't search everything, right?
You can't search for what you don't know, for what you're not looking for. Yeah.
Right. And so that does happen. And the way it typically comes up is on the website, there's a function. I'm going to give you a longer answer. I know you want to make this quick, but there's
please.
A function where you can submit a request to have your answer reviewed.
I was wondering about that too.
Yeah. And you can do that the day of the match or after the results are posted.
Okay.
And when players submit a review for a question after the results are posted, it virtually never gets turned.
Okay.
The only times it does, and it's just a handful per season, is when there was just a miss. Like you had a typo which was just obviously correct and it just got missed.
Right.
So that's usually what happens. But the reviews that happen during a match, those are whenever there's a time when there's an alternate answer that's accepted, that's usually when it gets revealed.
Okay.
Like I'll ask a question and this is the answer that's good for it, and then I'll see a bunch of people submitted a review. Oh, the way that question is worded, actually this answer also fits.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say 95% of those reviews they're actually not correct.
Okay.
But sometimes they are, and if it's correct, it's correct. You have to count it. And so that does happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love it. Thank you for the voicemail. And now it is time, of course, to see if we can stump the quiz master, the trivia master, Thornton himself. This is a trivia question for Shayne. Today's episode is about LearnedLeague, and today's trivia question is about learning itself. Specifically, how great apes like gorillas, chimpanzees, and orangutans learn. How would you score this on defense? Or, is this a category you're fluent in, linguistics and apes? Or would you score this lower for yourself? I know, you're not playing against me, but...
Yeah. Well, I would say if someone were playing against me, they should rate this high, because I'm stumped about what this will even be.
All right. We do multiple choice here all the time because it makes better radio, but we'll get into that. So, while apes do not have speech, as we know, researchers and linguists have taught a variety of apes how to imitate human words and concepts through sign language, physical tokens, and computer symbols. These so-called encultured apes have been able to learn hundreds of words and phrases using these systems, and they can communicate in nuanced ways with other humans. I think we all remember Coco the gorilla, and there's been many others in science. However, there is one thing that encultured apes never do, even when trained to use language in this way. What is always missing from ape vocabulary? I have 3 choices for you.
Okay.
Is it A, they cannot make lists of objects longer than 3? Or is it B, they never talk about sex? Or is it C, they never ask questions? He's pondering.
I would guess. Yeah, sorry for the dead time here.
No, we're good.
I would. I'm stumped. I will guess, and this is a guess. I will guess number 3.
Okay. That they never ask
questions.
Any reasoning? What brought you to that answer? Is it purely a guess?
It's purely a guess, but it's kind of structurally different than the first 2.
Mm-hmm.
The first 2 are about things, essentially,
right.
Whereas a question is kind of the flipping language, right? It's kind of in the inverse of a statement, and so the first 2 are basically statements. So that's why I'm going to go with 3.
See, and I love this also. I love writing questions for similar reasons to you, but when I do multiple choice, part of the writing process is trying to trick the guesser with other plausible answers, which is not part of your structure, but it is a fun and challenging part of what I tend to do here. So I like seeing guests squirm a little bit. We will find out if Shayne is correct after this very important break. You know him, you love him. It's the people who make this podcast possible. And they are all the generous people who contribute at patreon.com/influencepod. And thank you to everyone, even those who subscribe at the free tier. You can just get updates about the show. You can ask questions of future guests. You can get episodes the second they come out. Not exactly, but the morning that they come out, right to your inbox. But if you do contribute at a financial level, even $1 or $5, etc., that's monthly. You can get perks, access to certain things, ad-free episodes, and of course, if you contribute at the executive producer tier, you get your very name spoken aloud. I was thinking maybe I'd whisper it, but no, I'm gonna shout it from the rooftops. Mostly because there's lawnmowers outside of my house that are competing with my voice. I'm gonna shout these people out right now. Thanks for contributing at the $10 or more level every month. They are, of course, Bowie Barks, of course, Dominic Kerr, of course, Duran, and lest we forget, a gentleman, a person, I presume, by the name of William. They could be a rabbit. We don't know that they're human, but assuming that they have been approved for a credit card and can contribute on Patreon, I'm going to assume William is a person. Thank you so much to everyone who subscribes, who likes, who leaves a review. You hear that, lawnmower? You hear it? That's what I gotta do. That's what I gotta fix later. Thank you for contributing so I can spend hours editing lawnmowers out of this podcast. Love y'all. And now it's time to see if Thorsten, aka Shayne, has gotten today's trivia question correct. We are back with Shayne Bushfield, also better known as Thorsten A. Integrity, proprietor of the LearnedLeague on this information superhighway that we love so much. And I have challenged him to a trivia question, multiple choice, which I know he's not used to in his neck of the woods. When we teach apes human language through sign language and symbols, they're pretty darn smart, except they do not do one thing. Was it A, they cannot make lists longer than 3 objects long? Was it B, they never talk about sex? Or was it C, this was Shayne's choice, they never ask questions? I always give guests the chance to reconsider after the break. Are you sticking with C, or are you gonna go in another direction?
I have second thoughts, but I'm gonna stick with C.
Okay.
I'm gonna stick with it.
The correct answer for the Trivia Master is, or I'll read you an excerpt from some of these articles here. Despite their impressive, although sometimes still disputed achievements, Kanzi, who was one of these apes, and other apes who participated in similar experiments, failed to ask questions themselves. Shayne has gotten the answer right. One researcher suggested that the ability to ask questions is probably the central cognitive element that distinguishes human and animal cognitive abilities. Encultured apes who underwent extensive language training programs successfully learned to answer complex questions about concepts like who, what, where, when, why. They have no problem answering human questions, but they never think to ask, where is my food? Where is my friend? They do not ask. And I just found that very fascinating.
Yeah.
Shayne gets it right. I shouldn't be surprised.
Whew, I'm relieved. That was a guess.
Great. I love it. What are some messages from your players, messages, comments, emails that you've gotten maybe over the many, many years that you've done this that have stuck with you, that mean a lot to you?
Well, so there's a message that I get, a certain type of message, which I think is probably the most rewarding, is when I'll get a message from somebody, and they're different messages, but they're along the lines of, sometimes they're very touching too. They'll be like, thank you for LearnedLeague. This is a way that I've been able to stay in touch with my dad, who lives, 3 time zones away. But during the season, we text every day to discuss the questions, something like that. Or that's one I've gotten recently. Another one similar to that is, LearnedLeague has been really great for me and my friends, my college buddies. We're all in different parts of the country. We don't get to see each other very often, but we have a group chat, and every day we talk about the questions. And a lot of times these messages don't hold back from, we like to have group chat and complain about the questions, and things like that, which is I love it. That's great. That's exactly what I want to hear. And sometimes like the really especially touching ones are like when somebody emails me to tell me that their friend passed away, like they were a player or their parent or something like that. And they'll say, LearnedLeague was a special part for us, it's like, things like that. So I really appreciate those messages.
I love that.
And yeah.
Let's talk about the honor system. I am not in the league yet, hopefully one day, but when you complete your round, you tick a box that says, I swear I have not cheated. I am an honest person. And I presume the vast majority of people are doing the right thing. But what happens how are cheaters determined, exposed, and how do you deal with them?
So
is it execution? Do you bring out the guillotine?
Well, so actually, Matt, I'm very happy to say that there's no cheating that happens or has ever happened in LearnedLeague whatsoever.
Okay.
So next question. All right. So cheating. I mean, it's the eternal question. It's part of it that can't be avoided.
Right.
And it's the thing that's the most difficult thing for me to deal with. Certainly by far and way ahead the most unpleasant thing to deal with. I personally don't think that there is a lot of it.
Mm-hmm.
I really truly don't. And for various reasons, I really don't think that there is a lot of it. But it's naive to suppose that there is none. There is some. And so I don't really want to get into detail about how it's detected or what's done.
No, that's fair.
And one reason, because I don't want to give cheaters,
a way to circumvent the guardrails there. Yes, for sure.
Right. But also I want it's really a matter of privacy.
Mm-hmm.
And so, even if I catch someone cheating, I still don't want to make their lives bad, by outing them, and so I try to deal with it discreetly. There are a fair number of players that do get expelled every season.
Okay.
But I try to deal with it discreetly. I certainly don't make any of it public, even though a lot of the discussion is public. I very much try to stay out of it.
Right.
And because at the bottom line, like this is a very, very important thing for me in my life. It is a central part of my life, and it's a really important part of a lot of players. Like some people are very serious about LearnedLeague, and I really respect that. I value it. I honor it. But I also admit that it's just a trivia league. This is a game. Whatever it is, whatever value there is to it, and there's a lot to a lot of people, it's a game, right? And so I don't want bad things to happen to people because of what happened in a game.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of the overarching mantra for me when I deal with foul play. And I say foul play because I don't even really love using the word cheating. There are rules. Sometimes those rules are violated. If you violate some of the really important rules, you can't play anymore.
Right. No
hard feelings. You'll find something else you enjoy instead.
Mm-hmm. You alluded to public discussion, which brings me to the community at large. Are there subreddits, Discord servers? Are there streamers or YouTubers who are like, yeah, I'm playing the new season, and here's like, how much of the questions, like, not that they're secret, but how do they disseminate out into the public sphere, or is there sort of a code of honor that keeps them a little quieter?
Oh, the questions themselves.
The questions themselves, but also the culture around the game, the culture of the league on the internet. Where does it live?
Yeah, so that's a good question, because I don't think there really is a LearnedLeague wide community on the web.
Okay.
With the exception of the LearnedLeague website itself, there's a message board forum on the website, which is used by a fair number of players, but not a significant percentage of players. The overwhelming majority of players and of members have never visited the LearnedLeague message board.
Okay.
It's fairly active, but it's probably less active than you might suspect for a community of 32,000 people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
excuse me, I think the reason for that is that this is, I don't know if I can necessarily say it's by design. I would love to say it's by design, but it might just be by its nature. The LearnedLeague community is really a network of thousands of small communities.
Cool.
And I kind of referred to this a little bit when I talked about like the friends with the group chat, you know?
Yeah.
I think that's the core of LearnedLeague community. And part of the nature of that is the way that you join. You join because someone referred you. So you already know somebody in the league when you join. And oftentimes you are included in that person's pre-existing smaller community.
Yes.
Or you create your own, or, you know, 1,000 different things that can happen. But I think like in terms of what, like the engine of communal activity in LearnedLeague, I think it's these smaller groups. There, like I said, there's the message board. I think there's a subreddit. I think there are some podcasts out there about it. I've seen people go on YouTube just to play live matches. Although
I watched a few things, but I could not find a ton on YouTube. But I did find a few older videos where people would answer questions live, and I was like, is this a thing? Is this a big deal that people do?
Yeah, I don't think it is. And I think a lot of people, and I respect this, I think a lot of people treat LearnedLeague as a private community. Yeah. Because it is. Yeah. Even though it's a lot of people, it's still a private community. And so I think the communal aspect is private. And so there's not a lot of public discussion about it, which is fine by me, because the motivating factor for me in working on LearnedLeague is the enjoyment of the current players. Yeah. So that's my focus. And so I don't really need for it to be publicized. It's not important to me that people know about it. I'm happy to, you know, talk to you about it and other people, but I'm not like seeking, you know, media attention for it. Right. I want the people who are in it now, the people who enjoy it now, the people who pay money for it now. I do it for them, and I want them to continue to enjoy it. Yeah.
Again, I just have to commend you and the group, because there's nothing like this on the internet right now that I can think of, because everything is about audience and scale and reach and marketing, you know, and selling. And this is a closed private community of 32,000 people who all agree that this is cool. Let's just be cool about it. Just be cool, and we can have a nice thing. It's amazing. I'll wrap up here with maybe like a broader philosophical question, which is like, what is the value of trivia? Capital T. The word itself implies that it is useless and trivial, but I certainly don't agree with that. What enraptures you about the concept of trivia?
Yeah, so you bring up kind of a good point there about the word trivia, because things that are, it depends on how you define it. Things that could be truly defined as trivial don't really work in a trivia game.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But so for me, trivia, and LearnedLeague in particular, is, like I said before, it's a game. And so there are values in games. Yeah. Like, we're not trying to solve any big problems in LearnedLeague. We're trying to have fun. And so whatever other goals there are, the number one goal is to have fun. If it's not fun, then none of the other goals really matter, because it's not going to last. Yep. So there is value in playing games. And a lot of those games are, like, if you think about just games in general in the world, like one category of games is sports. And what sports do is they promote and celebrate athletic excellence. So, like, if you play a sport, then, you know, it's promoting your health and it's promoting your athletic ability. And if you're a sports fan, then you are rooting for teams and you're rooting for players who do well in an athletic activity. And so I see trivia as sort of a different side of that coin. It celebrates knowledge. Yep. So it's not necessarily celebrating knowledge in the sense that it's celebrating intelligence. Yep. Just like necessarily like rooting for the Mets doesn't mean like you're rooting for fitness. You know, like it's a different thing. So
Yes.
you don't have to be like a certain kind of smart to have fun in trivia.
Yeah.
And you also, just because you are good at trivia doesn't mean you are necessarily a certain kind of smart, right?
Right.
They're different things.
Yes.
But it's kind of on the pathway of knowledge and of brain power. And I think that's something worth celebrating. It's something worth celebrating, and it's something worth having fun around. You know, so it's not so LearnedLeague and trivia games in general aren't tests. They're not evaluating how smart you are, and they're not evaluating how much you know in order to be a good person or to be successful in your job or your relationships or whatever. It's testing you to see how good you are at a game.
Yeah.
And the game is meant to be fun.
I love it. I love it. And you know, you're saying that you're not doing anything earth-shattering or important, but fun and human connection are probably more important than they have ever been in living memory. So
I agree
thank you for doing that. This is the part of the show where I typically ask guests, "Hey, how can people follow and subscribe and sign up?" But I think we've established that you need an in. So my final question: now that we know each other, and you are presumably a member in good standing of LearnedLeague, can I get in on this for next season?
I don't know. We just met, Matt. I think we might just...
you can't vouch for me yet.
I'm kidding.
Yes,
I did it. No worries.
I did it. The only reason to do this podcast was so I can get in. I did not actually care to talk to you.
This isn't even going to air anywhere, right?
No. I'm deleting this as soon as it. Shayne, aka Thorsten, thank you very, very much for explaining LearnedLeague and for creating this wonderful project that is now your life's work.
Thank you, Matt. It's a real pleasure talking to you. Appreciate it.
Well, I got what I came for. Should be getting that invite email in just a few minutes. So I'm just going to go ahead and hit the delete button on this episode, and I will talk at you in 1 week's time.